Today on the Education Choices podcast, we welcome Marvyn Harrison, founder of Dope Black Dads, an online safe space for fathers to discuss their experiences of being black, being a parent, and masculinity in the modern world.
Good afternoon, Marvyn. We're thrilled to have you on our Education Choices podcast today, and also to be able to feature you in our next edition of Education Choices magazine. And we know that you've just got back from New York and probably feeling quite jet lagged. We wanted to include Dope Black Dads and have obviously been looking at how you began. And you started as a closed WhatsApp group between a handful of fathers in 2018 and have now rather impressively grown across social media, the web, live events, and even winning a Webby Award, podcast, and also 250,000 members that you've now managed to build up across the UK, the US, and South Africa. What inspired you to set up Dope Black Dads?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I appreciate being a guest here. The inspiration for starting was just really being challenged by the idea of male parenting. Parenting is probably the only place which is heavily female normative. And so the male role in it is relatively untapped, unknown in terms of what the full scope and capacity of what, a man can do as a parent. And so, I've had some terrible experiences, things like going to baby groups or dealing with the NHS at times or medical professionals where I'm almost like ignored and erased. And, I aspirationally always wanted to be this like amazing father. I had this like picture of, Uncle Phil meets like, my wife and kids meets like Alan from EastEnders, all those like iconic characters, Desmond's, where you have almost like a relationship that's based on fun, but also clear lessons and boundaries. And that is a real balance of Black parenting. It's a really high energy, highly physically involved, emotionally involved. The hugs are incredibly warm. The laughter is loud. The food is delicious. There's all that, but there's real boundaries. There's a lot of fear-driven boundaries historically, but I wanted to have this really beautiful relationship with my children. So when I had my second child and I found I was finding it difficult to connect with her, it really, really impacted me. So I just wanted to talk to other dads about it, really. And I think being Black fathers, knowing the historic and cultural pressures, as well as the like fatherhood stuff, really, really mattered. And we just started having really important conversations that I've never heard, even people that I've known for many years. We had never had it before. So it was a beautiful beginning. And then since then, us telling our stories of what we've experienced by one, openly acknowledging the challenges we have in parenting, what that's then created has meant that more dads have come out the woodwork and is now talking about this thing that, we're all going through at once around the world. Every man has a possibility of being a dad, and you've got to understand it before you start it. And if you've already started it, you got to understand how to keep it honest and pure.
So it began just through your experiences with your family. And how did it start to grow into this bigger entity that it's now become?
Yeah, the first thing was when we took it from the group. So we had 23 people, and then the themes we put in a podcast, because we were like, we're discovering things that we didn't even understand. So I assume nobody else understood. So we want to be able to talk about it at length. So creating the podcast was something we did quite early on after about 3 months. And it was just like a conversation. We didn't really do the fancy bed music with the transitions. It was just like, hey, we're here. This is the podcast. So what's going on today? And then we would start going into these themes. So the podcast being picked up by The Guardian was the first big thing. And that happened January 2019. And then by April of that year, we had our show on BBC Sounds and One Extra. And then from there, we haven't really looked back, to be honest. We've continually grown every year with a new addition to how we're touching people. And for me, I think telling the stories of Black men through fatherhood is absolutely paramount, and we try to honor that as much as possible.
Which leads on to my next question. What do you think the biggest misconception society has about Black dads, and why do you think this is so?
It's funny because I'm working on my adult book at the moment, and we're discussing a couple of themes. And one of the ones that keep reoccurring is absenteeism. And so Black fathers are as equally absent as any other race in country. There's no particular adverse stat. But I think what happens is because of the size of our population, when you transfer that, so I would say absentee fathers are an epidemic anyway. And then when you put it into a particular culture with other pressures, it then magnifies it as a huge, huge challenge. but it's one symptom of many things as to why that happens for men. And I think we spoke about it very early on, parenting being very female normative. That's hugely problematic if the fathers don't feel they can bring their full self. I think the confidence in parenting for dads is low. It's not a place where they feel powerful. It's a place where they're constantly second guessing themselves. They almost feel like they're blagging it a little bit. It's like slight imposter syndrome. So for those who do feel powerful in it, please share all your secrets. But something that we've acknowledged is that there's just that slight feeling of doubt when dealing with your children, taking them on your own, going on holiday for yourself. How much should I hug them? Should I kiss them? Can my daughter wear nail varnish? My son wants to wear a dress. How do I approach all these things that are happening? What's the appropriate level? Where's the boundaries? Disciplining, all those things come up. But when you're a man, it has a different texture to it than necessarily as a mother.
Very well said. You've written a book which is due to be released in June 2022. It's Dope Black Dads with 2 leading publishing houses. And you state, this one is for the adults and specifically our families who want to understand us more and to love us better. Do you want to tell me more about the book and explain what you meant by that?
What's really interesting is our platforms are followed by, I think it's 65% women. So the men are in our spaces and they know what we're talking about. And so they don't follow it in the same way. They are part of it. They are it. Whereas for women observing it, you get to learn what your partner's like. You get to learn what he's maybe thinking that he hasn't actually expressed to you yet. You get to be introduced into the deeper psyche of men. And I think women really care about, how their partners are. The reason why men don't go get health checkups, what that is all about, how to really approach it, why that's important. It's usually the people that love us that show up for us the most. As men, we don't show up for ourselves like that. A lot of men, if you're an active, present, loving father, your whole mission is dedicated to supporting your family. That's it. You abandon yourself every day. And I suppose this is the other side. So on one side, the conversation is women are not paid enough, which is true. We need to fix that. The other side of it is that men dedicate their whole purpose to making money and being useful in that way. And if that's taken away from them, whether through their own means or not, it devastates a lot of their meaning. I personally would rather have a balance, the more feminine balance that exists in terms of being closer to my children and then going to work than to make money, but that's my only meaning. And I have no deep connection with my actual children, my actual wife, my actual friends and family, because all I'm measured on is capitalism. That doesn't work for me. So I think that's happened to too many men. And that's why, you see things like suicide rates significantly higher in men. I think it's 75% of all suicides are men. It all adds up to the same unworkable list of challenges that are unique to us. And it's not a comparison to women. It's an and, in my view.
So these are obviously some of the key areas. What other main areas is the book looking at?
The key chapters that we look at is masculinity. So what that actually means, when to know that you're ready to have children, your finances, your mental and physical health, being LGBTQIA and fatherhood. And that's talking about it from the aspect of people who have been raised as LGBTQIA people and a couple of fathers that we knew, to speak about that complete experience of being parented as well as being a parent. And then what it's like to be a woman and how we protect women as a community and what we should be doing. We dedicated a whole chapter to that conversation where women are speaking about their experience of not being protected by men and the men that have protected them and how important and impactful that is. So it's a real community book. It's talking about all aspects that impact us, and it gives everyone space to talk about their story. But from a dad perspective, what we want people to do is identify, should I even be in a relationship? What type of relationship structure should I be in? Am I ready to have children? What does that look like? What types of masculinity am I engaging in? What actually is it? Things like co-parenting and cohabiting, there's an art form to that whole thing. Mental and physical health, money, finances, your economic chances, all of those things are all connected to the safety of your family. Like, what does family even mean? What happens when you have a blended family? If you get divorced, is at the end of your family? How do you redesign your family when separation kicks in? Those things are real questions that are modern challenges. And so we try to have an answering view on all of them.
Very good. And obviously, I think the pressures on parents, on young people are much harder than I think ever before with the way society keeps moving. So I'm sure there'll be lots of people very interested in that. You've also written a children's book. I believe the title is I Love Me, which is due to come out in May 2022. So you're not only reaching out to young adults or adults and Dope Black Dads, but also this is written very much for children. And you say that this is a very personal project and you're trying to address the mental resilience and self-love that you also address with your own children to support them in a time when being Black can potentially create challenges that other children wouldn't have to consider, and to help them so that if they do encounter any negatives, they're not internalizing these. Is this based on your own personal experiences growing up?
It is. And I think I had one of those superhero mothers that covered most bases, and she just fed me enough lines to navigate the things that were happening. But in some of the gaps, in terms of not only just like, there's like survival coaching, then there's like growth, like the growth state of like, how do you get people to understand that they are capable of doing incredible things as they are. Most of the time people feel like there's a hidden room where greatness lives, and they just don't get that it's just you accepting who you are and going forward with it. Stop apologizing, stop being small. You know, with my children, I create mock scenarios where if someone says to you they don't like you, I'll push my daughter and be like, I don't like you. What would you say? And first she'll be like, I don't like you either. And then I'll be like, well, that's not very accurate. And you may like them. And so why don't you say, I love me, or I like me? And so you're just ignoring what they're saying and you're doubling down on what you know to be true, which is, I love me. Now, my daughter's 3. And when you explain that to adults, they look at you like, well, you do that? And I'm like, yes. And now if I do it, and I test it, you know, every couple of days, I'll just come and be like, I don't like you. And I'll look and shit. And then she go, oh yeah, but I like me. And then she remembers the words to say. And that's the accurate response to someone that doesn't like you. It's none of your business if they don't like you. You like you. And as adults, we don't even do this to ourselves. And it's something that I got to learn to do even more for myself. But I do it for my kids every day. We call it mirror talk in our family. And like, if they say they're walking along a wall and they get scared to jump down, when we go home, we'll be like, I'm brave. Or we'll tell them to shout, I am brave, and then they'll jump down. So those things, it really does land and work with them. And kids are incredible sponges. And so this book will teach all parents how to do it. And it works for all ages as well. It's brilliant. And even it will work for parents. Well, what probably ironically happen is that parents start doing it at night and then realize that they feel good. They'll be like, oh, I feel good about saying that. And then they'll start doing it in their own way for themselves. So I think it's a great gateway for parents, for children as well.
And how do you think we can educate children from all different backgrounds to be more inclusive in their thinking?
I think the number one thing is just decentering the TV, the content, the books that you're buying for your children, the dolls, the toys. So often there's a real Eurocentric view on the types of toys that you get. And we always probably buy these things, like for dolls, for example, we always buy them ironically to replicate our children, where it's way more powerful to get them to represent other people. And the same thing with like boys with dolls. It's the reason why you give them to them, because he's like, play doctor, play teacher, play fireman, play policeman, play any game where a role in society that's positive, and use dolls as a guinea pig. 100%. It's way safer than using your younger siblings. So go ahead and do it. And I think when we frame it in a healthy way, it's really, really easy to adopt. So the number one thing I think everyone should be doing is just really looking at, if you're putting on a YouTube video for like a dance tutorial, really question like, why have I chosen this one? Why don't we try and find someone that's a woman, for example? I do that too. My son has just started using a language that boys are better than girls. Now I know where that comes from. It's just competitive. He's like, we're better. But I'm like, no, this is not how it is. This is what women can do amazing. So I try to make all the powerful influences around his education of skill women. And then he starts to look at them differently in the role that they can play. But we've all got to take a proactive stance in it.
Yeah, I remember very early on, my daughter's now 19, but I remember her taking a view that all the films that she was watching, all the superheroes were men. And I remember her even 10 years ago saying, where are all the women? So I think they do notice, and it does then come back through their language. In the summer of 2021, you and Jess Malley started the BELOVD agency, which is a diversity and equality inclusion partnership that speaks on behalf of all intersections of humanity, or what you call your pillars of intersectionality, in order to improve their futures. How are you working through BELOVD supporting this, and what are your main aims?
So I think one of the key things I identify is we were doing some educational stuff with Dope Black And, we were going into schools or we were going into workplaces, and it was loads of fun. We'll go and do a panel about something and everyone would clap and be like, this is great fun. But there was no way to support structural change. And so what it meant was it didn't have any long lasting legacy. So I wanted to make sure that we had a path to really help people in the workplace. And for me, the workplace is the number one place where you can really reach people, because no matter who you are and what you believe, you kind of have to turn up with a small part of yourself being in the best part of yourself. Whereas if you try and do it through the government or through the home or with children, it doesn't land in the same. But as all of us go to work, and in that you start to be introduced to ideas about cultural transformation, or you start looking at your own transformation. And where it starts for us is about mindfulness. So we go about it in the sense of you have to pose yourself the question, why isn't my life working? Or why is it something right here? And it happens to us all. When we all put on our yoga pants and go to the Far East to do meditation, that comes at a point of something not working. And you now have a question. What we want to do is start doing that earlier and more intentional. And when you say it's not working, you start investigating, and you'll start finding the reason why things don't work is because your relationship with people, whatever that is, your life is made up of the people and not the things in it. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of identify. So us working with organizations is about collecting data, educating the whole team, changing the recruitment practices, looking at gathering insights, looking at all the outputs you have as a business. If you think about Tesco, they have an incredible supply chain. They're probably making, I think at one point they were making $1 billion a week, but they're probably making hundreds of millions every week in turnover. If they just started to supply 5 brands that were women-owned or owned by different minorities, you change someone's generational wealth, you change someone's life from the back of that one act of intentionally putting diverse owners of brands in. And I think those are the types of things that we're asking companies to do now, and be proactive in the change, because we can't keep having this lack of equity outside of the white male community. It has to be democratized to everybody else. So our job is to hold your hand and be a partner in your challenge in doing so. We work with incredible businesses, and we're really privileged to be able to do so.
And you're obviously going in and offering advice and making suggestions related to how they can become more diverse and inclusive in their work teams.
Absolutely. And it's not just about employing and having people that look different. You have to have people who have from class, different backgrounds, gender, LGBTQIA, race, religion, all those elements, neurodiversity, they all add up to making a workplace that's actually somewhere people want to be, but also where you can get the best work done. Because most people, whatever your output is, if you've got people in your team from different backgrounds, they'll just add flavors that you can't get on your own. And these are the flavors that everybody's curious about. People want to tell the undertold story of the new communities that are being emerged in the last 5-7 years, rather than keep retelling. There's only so many times that a white male can save the world. I watched Avengers the other day. It was making my eyes itch. I was just like, how many could it be, in any form of like superhero-ness? And it was interesting how the last Avengers film, they had this really, I felt it was powerful, but it was like a really powerful scene where the women take over the thing that they're trying to protect, and they're the ones that get it to the next stage. And it was just really nice to see all the female characters centralized specifically, because it's saying that we see you. And I think really that needs to be built upon. But those moments, like, Black Panther is a moment, but it's got to be built upon. We need Black superheroes too, because not every time the world is ending in the US, it's ending in Africa too. It's like, sometimes just do it there. It's funny, we had a joke about how the world never ends in Africa, but it's like always in America. And then once it's saved in America, it's just saved for everybody.
Everywhere. And the Statue of Liberty is always in there somewhere, even in King Kong. I think we're all hoping that Idris Elba is going to be the new James Bond, aren't we?
I would love to watch it, but I think the backlash is making me feel uncomfortable, and I want him to live a peaceful existence too. So probably just give him a new film and just find us someone that we want to see that's really engaging. I just want to watch somebody that represents different ways. I think everyone understands what James Bond is, and we have it. How many white heroes are you going to try and protect? It'd be nice if they just looked at it in a different way. Even if he was LGBTQIA, even if it was a 00 agent episode that was led by a woman. So one film, like, just what are the world perspectives? How would that take and impact, the missions that they look after, the things that they care about, the way that they solve problems? It would be just nice to see.
Yeah, very much so. Beloved clearly takes its inspiration. I actually saw on Instagram the other day that you've visited the house of Dr. Martin Luther King. But are there any other figures that have inspired you, or that you think people should take inspiration from?
Do you know what's really funny? The people that inspire me are people who do similar work to me. Like my business partner, Jess, really inspires me. I work with her every day. And I look over at my business partner and I'm like, you really are my partner, innit? Like you're really working, you really are pushing, you really care about the stuff that we're doing, you're really helping people. That really moves me. My computer's quite simple. And if I'm moved, I'm in. And so there's other people like Sace Holmes, Agnes from Black Minds Matter. There's like Kelechi Okorafor. There's like Tony Adnelli, Shante Joseph. There's just some incredible people that David Harewood, I love him. He's a credible actor and author. There's just people that just move me when I see them really standing authentically. Dr. Shola Shabomanu, Afro Hirsch. And I follow them. I follow them as fans. I watch them and be like, I know how much it takes for me to wake up every day and fight for constant justice all day, every day. And so when I see them doing it, it keeps me going. So I have tons and tons of heroes, but they're all people that are around me every day rather than sort of heralded figures.
Recently, you were awarded the Influence of the Year award in the Black British Business Awards. How did this make you feel after so much hard work?
It's interesting because I definitely am more aware of the work I'm doing and how much I'm working more recently because the tiredness really kicked in. And this year has been really difficult. But I'm not someone who really is too interested in the celebration. The mission is really focused on the change. And when I found BELOVD, an answer in BELOVD, I was so happy because I knew I could go to any organization and run this infrastructure and the structure and the strategy, and it would work. And we've been able to make that change. So that acknowledgement, at first, I kind of made it light of it, but then people around me were like, you do have to celebrate yourself, and in addition to doing the work. So I'm becoming more and more connected to the idea of being celebrated, being honored in any different way. And it's really, really nice. It's just such a nice gesture to be seen.
And it does take energy to keep on doing something. It's not like when you started doing this, suddenly you were earning £1 million. It does take energy. In our Education Choices podcast interview with Dr. Sandy Okoro, who's General Counsel at World Bank, but she also has acted for a long time now as a champion for diversity and inclusion, she discussed the use of language and that African art was often referred to, for example, as primitive, and Egyptian art could be referred to as ancient, and these labels and stereotypes have slowly started to lift. But do you still think that the language and the terminology we use remains an issue?
I think it does, because there's a lot of people who are determined to not use the correct language for real people. And I think what it becomes a great when the words are being misused. So things like wokeism being used is deeply offensive, because woke was about Blackness being aware of the things that we fund or the places that we're shopping that directly affect us. And so actually, well, I don't want to spend money at Chick-fil-A when they're anti-LGBTQIA. I don't want to shop there. And it's not a hypersensitive mission to just control everybody, but it's just like, why would you pay for something and make billionaires out of people who literally don't respect that you live and exist as a real person? And I think that's a really important notion that everyone should be paying attention to. And it has largely happened because most companies now have purpose-driven approach to them. Even companies that shouldn't really have one have tried to develop one, whether it's clean water initiatives or plastic campaigns. They're trying to make sure that they have a meaning. And I think it's fundamentally important. So language really does matter. It defines so much. Like words become your actions, it becomes your thoughts, it becomes your feelings. They're all connected. So if you say things, even if it's flippantly because you think, oh, you're being a snowflake, all of those things have an impact, negative energy in the world. So I don't want to go too high level with it, but I do think when people dismiss language, it immediately lets me know who they really are. If you're not connected to your word, then largely you're probably just saying things that you don't really mean. And there's only so much energy I will give to those people. So yeah, language doesn't matter. I think also how Blackness is represented in every walk of life. So things like Black Sheep and Black Wednesday and all these words that are used with Blackness to connote sort of negative things, for me are unworkable, and they need to be reworded because they do have an impact. When we then say a Black person, there's no way you can disconnect a Black person from all those Black things that we use as a default negative.
Very well put. Sandy was also, this is going back now to when she was a young girl, but she was told at her junior school, little Black girls don't become lawyers. And that was actually one of the things that drove her to prove that they could, and that she did. Do you think comments like this and this sort of discrimination continue to affect Black children or children from any ethnic minority, even today through education? Or do you think that there is raised awareness and things are improving?
I think things are gradually improving because there's a constant fight going on. So there's a minimum level of experience that people are prepared to have, and it improves every year. Absolutely. But could we be moving faster? Yes. And I think the barrier to doing so is a group of ignorance. It's a group of people who are choosing to not adopt language that really represents the people that they're trying to speak to, who haven't done the research and the insights to understand why these people exist, or they know, or why they're here, or what they need to grow. And I think for every 5 people that you say that you're never going to be a lawyer, one of those might turn around and be like, yes, I am, and come back with vigor. And the other 4 will be crushed and be like, I'm not going to make it, and then be lost. And then, 5 years down the line, we'll be like, oh, this person's been arrested or caught shoplifting. Why? Because you took away the idea that they could be something. You don't have to, it's not your job to tell them they can't. Our job is to be like, this is how I think you can. This is the code of how you could try to do it. You may have to go to this school or this university. And if you don't, you still might be able to do it, because there's so many levels of lawyer as well. So not everyone needs to own a law firm, work for the biggest law firm in the world. Pro bono, you can do it in-house. You can be a business affairs person with a law basis. There's so many ways to do it that you telling them that you can't is the most absurd. So even as a parent, please do not wash your mouth on the next generation, because I don't think it's fair. I'm very passionate about that.
Absolutely. You obviously took part in a lot of discussions and forums in October for Black History Month. How do you think that this is helping to improve racial equality and awareness?
I think Black History Month is incredible because I think it's a great way to create a milestone. I think some people see it as a performative time where everyone all of a sudden cares about Black things. I think you care about Black things all year round, and you should care about Black things all year round. But what we also need, in addition, is a marker in the calendar to be like, how are we improving year on year? And I think Black History Month allows us to look at a year on year update on what the company's commitment's been to change, what the government's commitment has been to change, what our own social improvement has been. And I think that's a really important thing to consider.
You recently recommended Dave Harewood's book, Maybe I Don't Belong Here. What was it particularly about the book that struck a chord with you?
So David is like a hero of mine because he's just acted in loads of programs that I grew up watching and caring about. And one of them, particularly Baby Father, which was about Black fathers in the maybe 90s. A really good program about the challenges that we face with partners, our families, our children, ourselves. And so he's been somebody that I really care about. But then I watched his documentary and I was like, if you've ever experienced racism, it's so different because like there's things about you that can change. Like someone might say you're fat. You can go spend 6 months in the gym if you choose to, and it's not okay, but you can. And then in a 6 months time, that person will be like, oh, but that statement can no longer true. There's something about the fabric of what you look like, your whole body, your skin. You can't hide it. You can't blend in. It's instantly recognizable. So even if you want to switch off the button, you can't. And then for his experience, you read the first 2 chapters, oh my Lord, it was just like, I've had little symptoms of them. And I think it's just a powerful book. So between the documentary, his book, and him, for me, it was like honor to read it and to share that understanding with him, because it is a really traumatic and challenging experience when you feel British and you feel connected to a place, and then they constantly shun you at different levels, social level, institutional level, academically, on the news, your prime minister. Like it just, you start to sit there and think, what on earth am I here for? And that can have grave consequences if you don't have a support structure. But he was very, very strong to come back from the level of challenge that he went through. It was a real big deal. So yeah, he's definitely one of my heroes.
What would be a fundamental piece of advice you would give schools or companies to try to combat systemic racism and drive social and cultural change from within their institution?
So honestly, it's a difficult thing because it does need to happen at a government level. Unfortunately, the Department of Education do mandate a significant amount of what is possible. But I do think decolonizing the education is the number one thing. We need to actually talk about some of the historic events that have happened accurately. And there is this real desire to hold on to narratives that serve a white Eurocentric view, that like they saved the world, they civilized the world, industrialized the world, like all by themselves. Like even Egypt, the concept of Egypt, when it really is Kemet, when the timing of the pyramid probably coincided with it being predominantly Black, would never be told properly. We'll never learn about the Moors and what they did in Europe and how dominant they were. We'll never learn about Massa Musa and him being the richest man ever in the history of the planet. These things are just like really empowering for people. But to empower a group of people, potentially you don't want to empower them, which is why you're preventing the truth from coming out. We're not asking for favorable narratives. We just want the truth. We just want to be able to tell our kids what's actually happened. We weren't slaves, we were enslaved. It's a completely different framing. Somebody did it. And I think like people say that it's not to do with us, but then if it's nothing to do with you, why would you not heal it? Why would you not repair it with the people? Why would you not have reparations? Why would you not look at ways to move forward? Because it's connected to something bigger that there's no point going into now, but I would love wherever any teacher can, decolonizing your education and centering non-white males on the reason that everything has happened in a positive sense. Who else played a role? Like the roles of minorities in the First and Second World War always gets overlooked.
And there's a book that's recently been out, The Black Tudors, which are just completely omitted from the whole of history.
Yeah, it's not by mistake, and I think only teachers can save us, because I'm not really into the political left and right wing stuff. I just don't really buy into it too much, because I think people are a little bit of everything depending on what the situation is, whether it's social or economic. But what I do really care about is just you can tell the truth really, really easy. And I think the truth is so empowering, because one, it stops us from preventing it happening again, but also it just means that people get freed from this idea of themselves. We could have an incredible economy if we actually made it fairer, like incredible economy. There's loads of talent that isn't heard or seen, stories that haven't been told, business opportunities that haven't been invested in, all because of these things. And I think it's really important that we start shifting.
You've obviously become a leading figure in change and challenging stereotypical male and female Black narratives. Is there anything that you're particularly proud of?
To be honest, I think we've genuinely helped people's lives. I think we've put money in people's pockets. We've helped them emotionally. We've introduced them into therapy. We've talked about topics that many people haven't heard directly from Black men before. We've stood up for marginalized groups wherever they are, at every level of society. We've normalized LGBTQI dads. If you're a queer father, like Dope Black Dads, there's no difference. But making all of those things centered in the conversation, heavily normalized, I can't see it any other way. That's my truth. So I'm really proud of my ability to connect with all these great people and share space with them, hear their stories, add any value to their existence whatsoever. But there's a lot more work to do. Like, it's just going to be a lifelong work. I don't think it will end. I think I'll be 80 odd with a stick in my hand, waving it at some sort of building that's oppressing people. It just is a part of my DNA. So I've learned to accept that. I just need to make sure that I look after myself, because whenever I have the power, I will always speak on the things that move me.
What do you hope then? Well, you slightly touched on this really. So 10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
For me, I'm very, very much dad-centric. So I just want to build this incredible relationship with my children. So, the stuff that I do outside of it. So the way I look at it is my life is a bit of a pyramid. It's my children first. And then whatever I have left, I go into my purpose. And whatever's beyond that, I help others. And so I really want to see them grow. The idea of watching them, looking at Tati, no offense, Tati, but I feel like, my children being your age would make me so happy. Just to see like them on a Zoom call, just working, being, living, and just witnessing that would be the absolute pinnacle of existence. So I can imagine your parents probably just looking at you sometimes. You're like, what do you want? And they're just staring at you being like, I remember when you were just like, I want to be that. I'm going to be that. The father I'm going to be older is like, it'll be a lot. I feel sorry for my children, but I'm going to be the complainer. Like, I need a hug. Give me a kiss now. I'm going to kiss my children until they're like literally too old. I don't care. All those things, I'm taking all my blessings.
I threaten to get a bell and ring a bell every time I need something.
Yes. I raised you.
That would be my payback.
Yes, you were inside me. Get me my drink. Like,
done my time. Thank you so much, Marvyn. A fantastic interview, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of fathers reading the magazine who are going to be so inspired listening to you, and hopefully maybe even will reach out and get in touch with you, whether through BELOVD or whether through Dope Black Dads.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that your children absolutely adore you. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time out.